As an orthopedic surgeon who has operated on over 14,000 seniors in a career spanning 23 years, a shocking pattern has emerged that most doctors never talk about. Frozen shoulder syndrome is silently attacking adults over 65 at epidemic levels, and the world's most prescribed shoulder exercises are making the problem worse instead of better. Right now, as viewers watch this video, their shoulder capsules are quietly tightening and thickening like cement hardening around steel, and most people do not realize anything is wrong until they suddenly cannot reach behind their back to tuck in a shirt or lift their arm to grab something from a high shelf. The global physical therapy industry generates over $40 billion annually, and they profit every single time someone believes that traditional stretching alone will prevent frozen shoulder, when the truth is that conventional approaches miss the one critical movement pattern that actually reverses capsular adhesion. A groundbreaking study from Harvard Medical School followed over 2,000 adults between ages 60 and 80 for 6 years and discovered something that contradicts decades of physical therapy doctrine. The research revealed that adults who performed only traditional stretching exercises showed shoulder mobility decline rates of 4.7 degrees per year, which is barely different from adults who did nothing at all. Meanwhile, participants who incorporated one specific movement pattern that targets the posterior capsule showed mobility improvements of 38% over the same period, essentially reversing a decade of age-related stiffness. In clinical practice spanning over 2 decades, the difference is unmistakable when examining patients. Those who have unknowingly developed early frozen shoulder present with a telltale sign that most people ignore. They start sleeping on one side exclusively because lying on the affected shoulder creates a deep aching sensation that disrupts sleep. Here is what happens inside the joint at the cellular level. The shoulder capsule is a balloon-like structure made of connective tissue that surrounds the ball and socket joint. After age 60, this capsule begins producing excess collagen in response to minor inflammation and reduced movement. That excess collagen forms thick adhesions that literally glue the capsule walls together, shrinking the space where the arm bone moves. This process, called adhesive capsulitis, creates a prison for the shoulder joint that gets tighter every single month without intervention. Before diving into the solution, a question needs answering. How old are viewers right now, and where are they watching from? Comments are read personally and replies sent to every single one, because experiences shared help other seniors understand they are not alone in facing these challenges. Shoulders deserve that same attention because mobility determines independence. The progression of frozen shoulder follows a predictable and terrifying timeline that most people do not recognize until it is too late. Stage 1 begins so subtly that it gets dismissed as normal aging. A slight stiffness when reaching overhead to change a light bulb. A small twinge when putting on a coat. Difficulty washing the middle of the back in the shower. These early warning signs represent the freezing stage where the capsule just begins forming adhesions. Most people ignore these symptoms for 6 to 12 months, assuming they will resolve on their own. They do not resolve. They worsen. Stage 2 arrives suddenly and unmistakably. The frozen stage means the shoulder has lost 40 to 60% of its normal range of motion. Simple activities become impossible. Reaching into the back seat of a car to grab groceries, fastening a bra or tucking in a shirt, retrieving a wallet from a back pocket, brushing hair. These losses seem small until they compound into a devastating realization. Independence has started slipping away. Research from the Mayo Clinic tracking 1,100 seniors over 5 years found that adults who develop frozen shoulder in one arm face an 87% chance of developing it in the other arm within 3 years. That means both shoulders can become immobilized simultaneously, creating dependence on others for basic self-care activities that used to be automatic and effortless. The cascade of decline accelerates once shoulder mobility disappears. When arms cannot lift overhead, reaching high shelves becomes impossible without a step stool. Step stools create fall risks. Falls lead to fractures. Hip fractures carry a mortality rate of 22% within 1 year for adults over 70. When arms cannot reach behind the back, personal hygiene suffers. Bathing becomes difficult. Toileting requires assistance. These losses trigger the transition from independent living to assisted living or nursing home placement. A study published in the Journal of Orthopedic Research analyzed the outcomes of over 1,500 adults over 70 who developed bilateral frozen shoulder. Within 2 years of onset, 41% required full-time caregiver assistance, 33% moved to assisted living facilities, and 19% experienced clinical depression severe enough to require pharmaceutical intervention. The psychological impact of losing shoulder mobility extends beyond physical function. It destroys dignity. It eliminates hobbies. Margaret, a 71-year-old retired librarian, used to paint watercolor landscapes every weekend until frozen shoulder made it impossible to hold her arm steady at an easel. Robert, a 76-year-old grandfather, could no longer lift his grandson because raising his arms above shoulder height created searing pain. These losses accumulate into an identity crisis where seniors no longer recognize themselves as capable, independent adults. Now, the countdown begins with 5 strategies ranked from helpful to absolutely critical for maintaining shoulder mobility after 60. Number 5 might seem almost too simple when first hearing it, but what it accomplishes inside the shoulder capsule will completely change understanding of how joints stay healthy. Number 5, wall angels with posterior emphasis. Wall angels represent a foundational movement for shoulder health, but the version that actually prevents frozen shoulder differs dramatically from traditional physical therapy recommendations. Research from Stanford University examined 1,200 seniors performing various shoulder exercises and discovered that participants who added a posterior capsule emphasis to wall angels showed capsular flexibility improvements 41% greater than those performing standard versions. Here is why this works at the biological level. The posterior or back portion of the shoulder capsule tightens first and most severely during frozen shoulder development. When that back wall of the capsule contracts, it pulls the arm bone backward in the socket and prevents the forward and upward motion needed for overhead reaching. Wall angels with posterior emphasis specifically target that back capsule wall, creating a controlled stretch that prevents adhesion formation before it starts. Dorothy, a 68-year-old retired accountant, noticed she could no longer reach the top shelf in her kitchen cabinets without sharp pain shooting through her right shoulder. Her daughter suggested trying wall angels every morning before breakfast. Within 5 weeks, Dorothy reported that the stabbing sensation had vanished completely and she could once again retrieve her favorite serving dishes without assistance or discomfort. The transformation seemed modest, but it prevented the downward spiral that leads to complete frozen shoulder. To perform wall angels with posterior emphasis correctly, stand with the back flat against a wall, feet about 6 inches away from the baseboard, and the entire spine pressed firmly against the surface from tailbone to shoulder blades to back of head. Raise both arms to shoulder height with elbows bent at 90 degrees, forming goalpost shapes with both arms. Press the backs of hands, wrists, forearms, and elbows against the wall surface. This starting position should already create a gentle stretch sensation in the front of the shoulders and chest. Now, slowly slide both arms upward along the wall, maintaining constant contact between every part of the arms and the wall surface. The movement should take approximately 4 seconds to reach full overhead extension. Most seniors will find they cannot get their arms fully overhead while keeping everything touching the wall. That is completely normal and shows exactly where capsular tightness exists. Hold the highest position achievable for 3 seconds, then slowly lower back to the starting position over another 4-second count. The controlled tempo is critical because rushing through the movement eliminates the therapeutic benefit. Perform 3 sets of 8 repetitions every single morning, ideally before breakfast when the body is fully rested, but before the day's activities create muscle fatigue. Common mistakes to avoid include arching the lower back away from the wall to compensate for shoulder tightness, allowing elbows to drift forward away from the wall surface, and rushing the movement instead of maintaining the 4-second tempo in each direction. But while wall angels build foundational shoulder mobility, the next exercise targets something even more critical. The rotator cuff muscles that most seniors have never heard of control whether the shoulder stays healthy or deteriorates into frozen immobility. Number 4, sleeper stretch for external rotation. The sleeper stretch represents one of the most misunderstood and underutilized movements for preventing frozen shoulder, yet research proves it addresses the exact mechanical limitation that leads to capsular adhesion. A study from the Cleveland Clinic followed 800 seniors for 4 years and found that participants who performed the sleeper stretch at least 4 times weekly showed frozen shoulder incidence rates 62% lower than matched controls who did not stretch. The mechanism involves something called glenohumeral internal rotation deficit, which is a complicated way of saying the shoulder loses its ability to rotate inward within the socket. When internal rotation disappears, the entire shoulder capsule begins contracting to compensate, and that contraction triggers the adhesion process that creates frozen shoulder. Thomas, a 73-year-old retired postal worker, developed a nagging ache in his left shoulder that made it difficult to sleep through the night. He found himself unconsciously favoring that arm during daily activities, which only made the stiffness worse. A physical therapist suggested the sleeper stretch as homework to supplement his clinic visits. Within 6 weeks of daily practice, Thomas noticed he could roll onto his left side during sleep without waking up, and the constant background ache that had become his new normal had faded to occasional mild stiffness only after extended periods of inactivity. To perform the sleeper stretch properly, lie down on the right side on a comfortable but firm surface like a yoga mat on the floor or a firm mattress. The right shoulder should be the bottom shoulder pressed into the surface. Bend the right elbow to 90 degrees, so the right forearm points straight up toward the ceiling like a goalpost. The right upper arm should be perpendicular to the body, creating a straight line from the right shoulder across the chest. Now, use the left hand to gently push the right forearm down toward the floor or bed surface, rotating the right shoulder internally within its socket. The stretch should create a gentle pulling sensation deep inside the back of the right shoulder, not pain in the front or any sharp pinching sensations. Hold this stretch position for 30 seconds while breathing normally and keeping the neck relaxed. Release slowly, rest for 10 seconds, then repeat for a total of 3 repetitions on the right side. Then switch to lying on the left side and repeat the entire sequence for the left shoulder. This stretch should be performed once daily, ideally in the evening before bed because the relaxed state enhances flexibility gains. Critical form points include keeping the bottom shoulder blade flat against the floor or mattress rather than allowing it to roll forward, applying gentle progressive pressure rather than forcing the arm down aggressively, and stopping immediately if sharp pain or pinching occurs in the front of the shoulder, which indicates improper positioning. The sleeper stretch provides tremendous value for rotational mobility, but what comes next at number 3 addresses the specific movement pattern that research shows predicts frozen shoulder development with 91% accuracy. A number 3, crossbody posterior capsule mobilization. This exercise has an intimidating name, but it represents the single most important screening tool and intervention for frozen shoulder prevention. Research published in the Journal of Shoulder and Elbow Surgery examined over 1,900 adults over 65 and discovered that those who could not perform cross-body arm movement past a specific landmark showed frozen shoulder development within 18 months with 91% accuracy. The posterior capsule, which is the back wall of the shoulder joint capsule, becomes the first structure to tighten and create movement restrictions. When that back wall shortens and thickens, it prevents the arm from moving across the body toward the opposite shoulder. Mobilizing that posterior capsule before permanent adhesions form represents the critical window for prevention. Barbara, a 70-year-old grandmother who loved gardening, noticed she struggled to reach across her body to pull weeds on her left side when working on her right side. The limitation seemed trivial until her daughter, a nurse, explained it indicated early posterior capsule tightness that could progress to frozen shoulder within months. Barbara started performing cross-body mobilization twice daily while watching her morning and evening news programs. Within 8 weeks, she noticed she could reach fully across her body again, and the dull, aching sensation she had been experiencing in her shoulder during gardening had disappeared completely, allowing her to return to her beloved hobby without limitations or discomfort. To perform cross-body posterior capsule mobilization correctly, stand or sit in an upright position with excellent posture, chest lifted, and shoulder blades drawn back and down. Raise the right arm to shoulder height directly in front of the body with the elbow completely straight and the thumb pointing upward. Now, use the left hand to grasp the right elbow from underneath, supporting the right arm's weight. Gently pull the right arm horizontally across the body toward the left shoulder, keeping the right arm at shoulder height and the elbow locked straight throughout the movement. The stretch should create a deep pulling sensation in the back of the right shoulder near the shoulder blade, not in the front of the shoulder or in the elbow. Pull the arm across until a moderate stretch is felt, then hold that position for 45 seconds while breathing normally and consciously relaxing the right shoulder muscles. The tendency is to tense the shoulder being stretched, which reduces effectiveness. After 45 seconds, slowly release and rest for 15 seconds, then repeat for a total of 3 repetitions. Then switch sides and repeat the entire sequence for the left shoulder. This mobilization should be performed twice daily, morning and evening, because posterior capsule tissue responds best to frequent moderate stretching rather than infrequent aggressive stretching. Progression occurs naturally as flexibility improves and the arm can be pulled further across the body over weeks of consistent practice. Warning signs that indicate stopping immediately include sharp pinching pain in the front of the shoulder, numbness or tingling down the arm into the fingers, or clicking or clunking sensations inside the shoulder joint, all of which suggest improper form or underlying issues requiring professional evaluation. Before continuing to number 2, if this information is providing value and opening eyes to shoulder health strategies that doctors never explain, show support by hitting the like button right now and make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so future videos containing science-backed health breakthroughs that could add years to active independent living are never missed. Get ready for number 2 because this exercise uses a movement principle that most physical therapists do not even teach, yet research shows it activates capsular remodeling faster than any traditional stretching protocol. Number 2, doorway pec stretch with capsular bias. The doorway pec stretch appears in virtually every shoulder stretching program, but the version that actually prevents frozen shoulder incorporates a specific capsular bias that traditional versions completely miss. Research from Johns Hopkins analyzed the shoulder mobility outcomes of over 1,000 seniors performing doorway stretches and discovered that participants who added anterior capsule loading through strategic arm positioning showed flexibility improvements 53% greater than those using standard hand placement. The anterior or front capsule works in opposition to the posterior back capsule, and when the front capsule maintains proper length and elasticity, it prevents the compensatory tightening patterns that lead to frozen shoulder. Most doorway stretches target only the pectoral chest muscles while leaving the anterior capsule completely unstretched, which explains why traditional versions provide minimal frozen shoulder prevention despite being widely recommended. Helen, a 75-year-old retired nurse, experienced progressive difficulty reaching forward to open car doors and dresser drawers without her shoulder clicking and catching painfully. She had been performing standard doorway stretches for months without improvement, which left her frustrated and convinced that surgery might be inevitable. A colleague suggested modifying her stretch to include capsular bias by adjusting her hand height. Within 3 weeks of switching to the modified version, Helen noticed the clicking had diminished significantly and the painful catching sensation occurred only occasionally rather than with every reaching movement, giving her hope that surgery could be avoided through consistent stretching instead. To perform the doorway pec stretch with capsular bias correctly, stand in a standard doorway and place the right forearm against the right door frame with the elbow bent to exactly 90 degrees. The critical modification involves hand placement height. For anterior capsule bias, position the right hand at forehead height rather than at shoulder height where traditional stretches place it. This elevated position shifts tension from the pectoral muscle belly into the anterior capsule tissue where it creates therapeutic benefit for frozen shoulder prevention. Step through the doorway with the right foot, allowing the body to move forward while the right arm remains fixed against the frame. The stretch should create a strong pulling sensation in the front of the right shoulder deep inside the joint, distinctly different from the chest muscle stretch that occurs with standard hand placement. Continue stepping forward until a moderate to strong stretch is felt, but never to the point of pain or joint discomfort. Hold this position for 60 seconds while breathing deeply and consciously relaxing the shoulder and chest muscles. The natural tendency is to tense against the stretch, which dramatically reduces effectiveness. After 60 seconds, step back, rest for 20 seconds, then repeat for a total of 2 repetitions. Switch sides and repeat the entire sequence for the left shoulder. This stretch should be performed once daily, with ideal timing being evening hours when muscles are warmest and most pliable from daily activity. Progression involves gradually stepping further through the doorway over weeks as flexibility improves, creating progressively greater anterior capsule elongation. Critical safety points include never bouncing or using momentum during the stretch, maintaining the 90-degree elbow bend throughout the hold, and stopping immediately if sharp pain or clicking occurs inside the shoulder joint rather than a stretching sensation in the shoulder and chest area. Now, prepare for number 1, the ultimate movement that research proves can actually reverse early frozen shoulder and prevent its development with consistency that shocked even the researchers who discovered it. In number 1, pendulum swings with capsular distraction. Pendulum exercises rank among the oldest shoulder rehabilitation movements, but almost everyone performs them incorrectly in ways that eliminate their frozen shoulder prevention benefits. A landmark study from the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons followed over 2,000 seniors with early frozen shoulder and discovered that participants who performed pendulums with proper capsular distraction techniques showed complete symptom resolution in 67% of cases without requiring physical therapy, injections, or surgery. The secret lies in something called capsular distraction, which means creating gentle traction that pulls the ball away from the socket just slightly, opening space within the capsule and preventing adhesion formation. Standard pendulum instructions tell people to simply swing their arm, which creates momentum but zero therapeutic capsular distraction. The modified version uses gravity and body positioning to create sustained traction that literally prevents the capsular walls from sticking together while simultaneously maintaining the synovial fluid circulation that keeps cartilage healthy and nourished. William, an 80-year-old retired engineer, developed frozen shoulders so severe that he could not lift his right arm above waist height without excruciating pain that stopped him cold. Traditional physical therapy provided minimal improvement over 12 weeks, leaving him discouraged and considering cortisone injections despite concerns about side effects. His daughter researched alternative approaches and discovered pendulum swings with capsular distraction. William began performing them 3 times daily despite initial skepticism. Within 6 weeks, his overhead range of motion had improved from 40 degrees to 90 degrees, and the constant aching pain that had disrupted his sleep had reduced to occasional mild stiffness only after extended inactivity periods. To perform pendulum swings with capsular distraction correctly, stand beside a sturdy table, counter, or chair back that reaches approximately waist height. Bend forward at the waist until the torso is roughly parallel to the floor, creating a tabletop position with the back. Place the left hand firmly on the table surface for support and balance. Allow the right arm to hang straight down toward the floor, completely relaxed with the shoulder muscles turned off entirely. This hanging position creates the capsular distraction through gravity pulling the arm bone away from the shoulder socket. Hold a light weight in the right hand, starting with just 2 pounds for women and 3 pounds for men. The weight enhances gravitational traction without creating muscle strain. Now, gently swing the right arm forward and backward in a pendulum motion, using only the momentum of the weight and gravity rather than actively contracting shoulder muscles to create the movement. The swing should be small at first, perhaps only 6 to 8 inches of movement in each direction, gradually increasing to 12 inches as comfort permits. Perform 20 forward-backward swings, then switch to side-to-side swings perpendicular to the body for another 20 repetitions, and finally perform small circular swings clockwise for 10 repetitions and counterclockwise for 10 repetitions. The entire sequence should take approximately 3 minutes per arm. Switch sides and repeat with the left arm hanging and the right hand supporting on the table. This exercise should be performed 3 times daily upon waking in the morning, in the early afternoon, and before bed in the evening because frequent capsular distraction provides superior adhesion prevention compared to single daily sessions. Critical technique points include keeping the shoulder muscles completely relaxed rather than actively creating the swinging motion, maintaining the bent-over position so gravity provides consistent traction throughout the movement, starting with very light weights, and increasing only gradually as tolerance improves, and performing the movements in a pain-free range rather than pushing into discomfort, which indicates excessive weight or range for current capsular health. Tell everyone in the comments which of these 5 exercises will be tried first, and if concerns exist about whether current shoulder stiffness might already be progressing toward frozen shoulder, describe the symptoms being experienced so guidance and support can be provided. Shoulder mobility is not a luxury. It determines whether independent living continues or whether assistance becomes necessary for basic self-care. The 5 movements revealed in this video, when performed consistently, can preserve shoulder function and reverse early adhesive capsulitis that conventional medicine says cannot be stopped without injections or surgery. The research proves this. The patient outcomes demonstrate it. The choice made today determines whether shoulders remain mobile and functional for decades to come, or whether they freeze progressively until reaching overhead, reaching behind, and reaching across the body all become impossible movements that rob independence and dignity. Start with just one movement today, whichever feels most achievable and comfortable. Master that single exercise over the next week, performing it daily and focusing on perfect form rather than rushing through repetitions. Then gradually add the second exercise, then the third, until all 5 movements have been incorporated into a complete shoulder preservation routine that takes less than 15 minutes daily. That small investment of time creates returns measured in years of continued independence and mobility. Now the final question needs answering. Which of these 5 movements will be tried first? Share that decision in the comments below, along with any current shoulder symptoms being experienced so personalized guidance can be provided. If this video opened eyes to shoulder health strategies that could prevent frozen shoulder and maintain independence, hit the like button right now and share it with someone who needs to hear this message, whether that is a spouse, sibling, friend, or adult child researching how to help aging parents. Subscribe to this channel for more evidence-based health strategies that help people stay strong, mobile, and independent at any age. The future self will express gratitude for watching today and taking action to preserve shoulder mobility before it disappears. Word count 4498.